you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nirmala. You know, filling up CVs is never a difficult thing. I think each of us in our journey through life, there is so much we do. I think what is more important is whatever that we do, what does that allow us to become? I think it's in that beingness, in that becoming. I think that is our ultimate offering back to this world. So thank you for your generosity. Thank you to JDMC for this opportunity. Thank you to Professor Pal and to all of you who are gathered here. I'm not going to think of this as a lecture. I'm just going to think of this as a sharing. So I will share some of my experiences and learnings with you, and then we'll make sure we have adequate time for you to ask your questions and share your thoughts. And like Nirmala ma'am said before, if you have questions and queries, please put it in the chat box so that we can address as many as possible. So once again, thank you, and with that, I shall begin. I will start with a story. When I was doing my master's in social work from Delhi School of Social Work, I used to be sent for field work to the New Delhi railway station in Paharganj. And there was a center set up by the Salam Balak Trust. Now, Salam Balak Trust was set up by the film director Meera Nair after she made this amazing movie called Salam Bombay. And those of you who want to understand the pain and the nuances of child labor, this is one of the recommendations that I will make. Please watch the movie Salam Bombay, made by Meera Nair. I think it was in 1983, 84, or 85, around that time. You should be able to find it. And from the proceeds that she got from that, she set up the Salam Balak Trust, which is there in Orissa, Delhi, Mumbai, and now I'm not sure where else. So I used to visit these centers and spend, 2 days a week to work with the children who used to be picked up by the policemen because they were all runaway kids who had left their homes, what we call the source area. So two terms you must remember in the world of child labor. One is the source and the other is the destination. So the source used to be where they lived, where they came from, where their families were. And so I met a lot of children from Bangladesh, from West Bengal, from Bihar, from Orissa, and so on and so forth, who used to catch a train and then change trains and then hide under seats or clean up the trains as the cleaners we used to see in those days. And then they would reach a big city like Mumbai or Delhi, which is what we call the destination. And so when they came in, they had zero social support, protection, or understanding of what they were coming into. Their worldview was that whatever we are going through at home is so bad that we need to escape, not knowing that sometimes what they were escaping into could become far more dangerous for them. So anyway, I went in. I used to be the social worker there, and with a degree in psychology, I used to do a fair amount of counseling, working particularly with youngsters and adolescents and so on. So when I went in one day, in the corner of the hall there, I saw a small bundle lying there, and I said, "What happened? Nobody's coming for cleaning this place. There's so much of rags lying in the corner." They said, "Ma'am, that's not rags. That's actually a 5-year-old boy whom we found in a very bad shape." So I walked up to him, and lying faint was this almost starving 5-year-old boy called Mirzan. And Mirzan had come all the way from Bangladesh. And when he later on, after getting his strength, a few days later, when he began to tell his story in Bangla, and then I kind of understood it in the best possible way. It was a story on which you could make a film. Just how, when he set out, not knowing, imagine 5 years, because his father had taken another wife and his stepmother used to beat him and starve him. So he runs away, and then how he kept changing hands um, while making this journey all the way to Delhi because somebody had told him that go to Delhi, you'll be able to survive. Long story short, he had tuberculosis, and I was a crazy person, crazier than now in those days. I actually picked him up and brought him home and nursed him back for a month. After which, then we took him back to his to the center, where they then and now do a fun, fabulous job of really rehabilitating these kids and teaching them so many skills. And some of the students who have moved out of Salam Balak Trust are, world-known names now. So Mirzan, decades later, comes to meet me, and I hope he's doing well wherever he is. So that's the story I wanted to share with you, because if we look around, these children are there everywhere. ILO's definition of child labor is basically to, and I'm just going to read this out to you because, anybody who knows UN language and conventions knows how many decades go into getting the perfect wording. So I don't want to mess that up. So, according to the ILO, child labor refers to work that deprives children, that is, any person under 18, of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity, and that is harmful to their physical and/or mental development. And there are two key conventions of the ILO related to child labor, which you must all know and study deeper. One is Convention number 138, and the other one is 182. And 182, Article 3 of 182 talks about all forms of slavery, practices, coercion, trafficking of children, bonded labor, all of this, which is not allowed. The procuring and use of children for prostitution, pornography, illicit activities, none of this is, allowed. And then if you go into Convention 190, it talks about children in the world of work. Any physical hazardous work that they are forced to do, coerced to do. Many times their families sell them off to pay off debts to the middlemen. And so I'm just going to illustrate to you how the trafficking supply chain works. And when I use the word trafficking, understand this is not just for prostitution and other things, but it's also for um, things like work. So an average child, I just finished a study a couple of years ago for the Freedom Fund in Rajasthan, where we were looking at child labor in the bangles industry, glass industry, and the jewelry industry, along with textiles. And so an average child from his village is sent off by his parents or runs away, meets a middleman who is usually a very friendly, known face in the railway platform or at the local tea stall, who tells him or tells his or her parents that, don't worry, send your child with me. I'll make sure that you get money every month, or once a year I'll bring him back and bring back his money. So don't worry, I'm like his brother, his uncle, his whatever, and I'll take care of him. So they trust. People are simple in the rural spaces. They trust and they send the child off. And then this middleman will pass him or her on to another person who usually does the train or bus routes, but mainly it's in the trains, who will bring this child to a central space from where it again changes hands, and then there is another agent who will take these people to wherever they are supposed to work, whichever state that is. So you can have a child, say, from West Bengal or Bihar, landing up in Tirupur in Tamil Nadu, or in Karnataka, or in Maharashtra, or anywhere, Rajasthan, Delhi, of course. So it's quite complex. And then, of course, I must mention that from places like Hyderabad and all, there are children who are trafficked all the way to Saudi Arabia for camelback racing and things like that. And I'm using certain terms which you can, if you're taking notes, you can note down, or if there's going to be a recording of this, I see there's a recording happening, maybe you can listen in so that you begin to do your own research. Understand this. Child labor is such a complex issue that it cannot be understood only theoretically. You need to open your minds and your hearts and understand the world in which we are living and working, and the world that society is co creating. This is really, really important. So, what are the reasons for child labor? I mean, why would anybody in their right mind want young children to be working like this? There are many reasons. Poverty is, of course, the number one driver. Um, It's because parents are not able to look after their children, they do not have access to proper education, they may have government schools which are not run properly, or there are untrained staff, or there's a lot of violence back home. It can be a whole host of reasons for which a child steps out of the safety and security of the four walls and comes out into this big, wide, crazy, dangerous world. Now, the other reason, which is very, very important, particularly to link it with why the destinations look for these children, the destination areas, it's because there's a lot of demand. There's a demand for children. There are certain industries, for example, cotton picking, or fine embroidery, or watchmaking, where you need the nimble fingers of children, even in the cracker industry or the matchstick industry, in some of the BD industries, you'll see there's a lot of demand for children with fine, nimble fingers. So, the other reason is the demand in certain hazardous industries. The third thing, and this I'm going to speak about a little more in an extended way, is because of the current capitalist global order that we are all operating under. And I'll come back to this in a moment, because the 15 years that I was with Gap Inc., you know, Gap, the clothing company, headquartered in California, I was with them for 15 years, looking very deeply into these issues of the ethical supply chain. Um, this structure globally actually increases the vulnerabilities of workers. And again, like I said, I'll come to that in a moment. And the last bit that I want to mention is, with the growth of internet and technology, unfortunately, the virtual space has become a trafficking ground for vulnerable children, from everything from pornography to other things that happen in the dark net, in the chat rooms, and so on and so forth. So there is a whole another world that has opened up where children can be very, very vulnerable. And interestingly, in the virtual space, it's not just poor children who fall prey and victims. Even to things like terrorism and brainwashing and so on and so forth. It can be anybody who has access to technology. So our world has actually got much more complex and complicated from the time that I found Mirzan in the Salam Balak Trust Center. And so then the question is, how do we, wrap our heads around such a complex issue? And then what can we do, each of us, you and I, in our sphere of influence, where we are starting, today? So let me come back to the economic structure. Today's world is one which is run by how the economic models have been fashioned. And it's very important for each of us to understand that a big shift in terms of global economics happened in the year 1980, when President Reagan came into power in the United States. Two, three critical changes were brought about, which have huge implications for the world 40 years later. Um, there's an economic theory called the trickle down economic theory, and this was actually it was Milton Friedman who put this out. And in the trickle down economic theory, Thomas or Milton, father son, I get confused, but one of the Friedmans, what they propounded was that the corporations, the large businesses, no longer are accountable to any other stakeholder, not to the consumer, not to the environmental groups, not to the communities, but only to the shareholders. And so the purpose of the business is to maximize the profitability for the shareholders quarter on quarter. The second change that came about as a result of this was, up till 1980, the CEOs of large corporations could not own any stocks and shares in the company that they worked for, because it was seen as a conflict of interest. So, with this clause going away, CEOs suddenly had a huge incentive to maximize their own wealth. Now, when Friedman wrote this theory, propounded this theory, he also added another very key thing, that this trickle down model can really work When the top people create a lot of wealth, and that wealth leads to setting up more industry, more jobs, and there's a trickle down of this wealth to the people who are a part of the supply chain system and the communities where they operate. And he also put in a caveat that this model will only work when there is a strong moral underpinning that businesses follow. What we've seen in the last 4 decades is people forgot that there needs to be a strong moral underpinning of how businesses operate, that profitability at all cost and any cost cannot be the only mantra, and just increasing the profitability for shareholders and the board and the CEO can lead to a very skewed world where we see so much of pain, suffering, and vulnerability. So, what has happened in the 4 decades since 1980 is that we have 1% of people in this world on this planet owning more wealth than the remaining 90%. This is how skewed the imbalances have become. So it's really important for us to understand the global context in which policies are set, governmental policies, various WTO negotiations, various uh, diktats, if I can call it that, from the World Economic Forum, how World Bank and IMF work. It's important for you to understand this larger landscape and then to zero in on a symptom, because that's what child labor is. Child labor is a symptom of a larger issue, which at some point will need to be systematically addressed by nation after nation after nation. And who is a nation? The nation is its people, people like you and me. So I wanted to give you this larger context because very often we wonder why. In the 2011 census data in India, not surprisingly, we have over 10 million children who are engaged in child labor. And I can say this to you with a great deal of surety 10 years later. I don't know when the new census data will come or how transparent it will be, but those numbers have only grown. They've not reduced. What happened in the world of work, and now I'm getting back to how we saw things change in the supply chain. So I joined GAP in the mid 90s when, as one of the first social compliance officers, definitely in the country, but also globally. Social compliance was a new field coming up at that point. And we worked very hard to really understand the complexities in the supply chain, to form strong partnerships with governments, with NGOs, with trade unions, with other businesses to see how we could address some of these issues in the communities from where the most vulnerable workers came. And these are usually, at least in a country like India, in the informal spaces. We have more than 60 to 70% of our workers still in the informal spaces, which means no one really knows who they are, where they are, what they do, and they don't access governmental benefits, social securities, things like Provident Fund, social EPF, and so on and so forth. Anyway, Provident Fund, ESI, and so on. So what we saw is the first decade, there was a lot of work, positive work to build up structures and systems. We worked with the ILO, with UNICEF and others. And this is not just India, I'm talking about the world at large, to put in place transparent systems to ensure that brands and businesses did right by their suppliers so that suppliers could actually work and pay their workers in a way that good ethical business happened. And then in 2008, the economic downturn hit the world with the US collapsing. And what we saw as a result of 2008 was a complete dismantling of everything that had been put up till that point. And post that, what happened, what became a business mantra for most global corporations was this race to the bottom, that we need to get the cheapest product fastest, because there was so much of pressure to survive and to continue to post this quarterly profit. Otherwise, the CEO, the board would all lose their places and their jobs and all the rest of it. So what we saw was a whole dismantling, and post 2008, we've actually seen an increase in the entry of informal workers into formal workspaces, the entry of more vulnerable women, And where women are also seen to be expensive, more and more children are entering the workspaces. Now, in the domestic supply chains in a country like India, and I'm not going to talk about Bangladesh or China or other places, but in a country like India, what we see is in the domestic supply chains, there's very little awareness or even an understanding of what is acceptable and what is not. So, at least with the international brands, because of all the public pressure and because of all the work that the media did in the mid 90s and 2000s to keep putting pressure on getting brands to look at their own supply chains, a lot of work was done. But if we come into the domestic space, and if you look at any of the popular brands in our country today, I'm practically sure very few of those businesses will even know who is working on their product. And this leads me to the other big thing about the roles and responsibilities that each of us has. The power of the consumer is huge, along with the power of the media. And as Indians, unfortunately, it's in our DNA to go after the cheapest product. We feel so satisfied and so happy when we have bargained things down to the bare sort of literally threadbare, and then we feel good and we'll come and brag about it to our families and friends and put it up on Insta and Facebook that I've got the cheapest product from here, there, everything, everywhere, without really stopping and reflecting, where does cheap come from and who pays the cost for this cheap. So Swati ma'am said this before she left, that each of us is responsible in a way for the mess that is there around us. And so at least we start as responsible consumers asking the questions to brands: where does your stuff get produced? Who produces it? Do you have children working in your supply chains? Is there any proper auditing or certification system that you use? How can I make sure that what I'm buying from you is not at the cost of exploitation of the most vulnerable in our country? It's time for us to step up and ask these questions. Now, I want to come to the role about, how important gender empowerment is and how that's linked with child labor. So there are studies after studies after studies which show that where women are empowered, where women have access to decent work. Now, this is another very important ILO term you must all remember. Look up and read up on what constitutes decent work. And so when you have women who have access to decent work, you will see that in those homes and households and in those communities and societies, children are not exploited as much. But where women are, they don't have financial access, their employment, even if it is there, is an exploitative one. They are, subject to a lot of social evils, domestic violence, and so on. Alcoholism of their husbands and spouses, huge issue in a country like ours. There you will see that children are often exposed to so much of vulnerability and violence early on that their readiness to go into very, very scary spaces is already there. So, as a society, we have to look around and ask these hard questions. But this also brings me to the other point. We're all, I believe most of us are women in this group here today. And history shows that. And I love this quote by Margaret Mead, which says that never doubt the ability of a small group of individuals to create change. Very often, it's the only thing that does. And so when a group of determined people, especially women, come together, and we decide to do something, it can start in our own homes, in our own villages, in our communities, with the domestic staff who come to work for us, to see how vulnerable are they in their own homes. How can we help their children access education? What can we do to help them address the issues of poverty and come together as a community? Because you and I may not be able to change 100 lives, but if, say, 20 of us come together and we have a proper focused mission, I'm sure a lot can be done. In fact, that's how great change and transformation always takes place. There are a lot of great organizations which work with child labor. I want to mention a few names. I already mentioned Salam Balak Trust. You have Rita Panikkar with her butterflies, which has been doing amazing work over the decades. Then you have the SOS Children's Village. They do a lot to reduce vulnerability of children. Then you have, of course, and I was very privileged to work with him, Kailash Satyarthi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize along with Malala. His Global March for Children and BBA, Bachpan Bachao Andolan. These are other organizations which are absolutely at the front. They play a very activist role, and so they are there rescuing children from sweatshops, what is called sweatshops, these small karkhanas where these children are literally put in cramped spaces and they'll be working. Shapur Jat, Tughlakabad, areas around Gurgaon, Faridabad. You'll see a lot of these sort of, spaces. So Gandhinagar, East Delhi. So these are places, again, I would recommend those of you who are interested in this, go do your own exploration. Don't go alone. Just go around, observe things, understand how these areas work, and you'll be amazed how much you're able to educate yourself. Experiential learning. So if there's one thing I learned after all these years of working in Gap, and post that, I continue to work on issues of women and livelihood, gender sensitization, and child labor and trafficking under the broader umbrella of business and human rights. Because I've seen the power of businesses to create change. I've been fortunate to be a part of it. And so when businesses begin to play a positive role, it's incredible what they can do. But coming back to that, I have learned in my journey that nothing substitutes for first-hand experiential learning. So get out there, observe for yourself, look at the children in the tea stalls, and don't come from a place of blame and judgment. Understand this, even in a small dhaba, if there is a child who's working and he's probably getting yelled at, the very fact that he's doing that is because that situation is better than where he's come from. So have compassion and empathy, but try and think deeper. What do we need to do to address the root causes? Because just putting band-aid is never going to work. And what we've seen, the world knows how much of work has been done around issues like child labor over the last 100 years. And yet the issues only grown more and more and more. So I'm going to, stop with basically sharing some statistics. Again, do your own research. Go on to United Nations, various organizations. Check out UNODC. Check out UNHCR, UNICEF, ILO, and so on. And I just had shared with Nirmala ma'am. I'll connect her to some resources who can come and address you from the ILO and other spaces, who can share some more information from that space. But look at all of this to understand how the world of work works. Currently, globally, the number one industry globally is, unfortunately but not surprisingly, is the armament industry. And that is why wars need to keep happening in some part of the world for this industry to continue to make its profits. And the second is not even drugs, which is what it used to be at one point. It's basically human trafficking, what we call modern slavery, where people are bought and sold in the world of work. And the world of work for work has now actually increased more than they are for, say, the sex trade or prostitution and so on. So this is a world which is in a way coming unhinged. But I also believe that every crisis precedes a transformation. And that is the opportunity that is there before all of us here today, in how we open our hearts and minds, how we continue to question, how we understand some of these root causes, how as a nation at least we look at a new model of economics, which is not just about profit at any cost, but which is really about it's about partnerships, it's about profitability for all. And there are some very conscious businesses. I'd like to name a few. Indus, INDUSTREE. Industry is an amazing business model where all the workers who work with them, the women, they are all shareholders. Then we have Seva. Seva is the world's largest trade union / NGO / social enterprise of women set up by Ela Bhatt in 1972. They have over 2 million women who are connected with them across sectors and industries. So, again, I was fortunate to work with Seva while I was at Gap. I still do work with them. I'd helped to set up Women in Value Chains working group in India a few years ago. And so we have a lot of these organizations like Seva and Oxfam and the ILO and Tradecraft and Care and Save the Children and others. And we meet every quarterly to look at how collectively we can move on issues of work. Also ask questions around the informal workers, understand that very few workers in our country are in the formal, seen, visible space. Rest are all in the informal, invisible space. And sad to say, post-pandemic, more and more of the workers have been pushed, either they're completely jobless and therefore having to resort to all kinds of exploitative forms. Post-pandemic, so many millions have lost their jobs. They have been particularly women. And now when some of the jobs are coming back, it's either going to the men or to the cheapest labor available, which means children who now don't have access to education because all of them are not digitally able to connect and therefore have nothing else to do but have to get back into this crazy world of work to be able to survive. And so keep your eyes, your ears, and most importantly, your hearts open. Look around, come around, connect with your friends. Those of you who are on social media, you can do a great service by understanding these issues, sharing relevant links, blogs, YouTube videos, talks, wherever you can, meeting up with your friends, creating support groups to look at issues like this. Because when we come together, we are so much stronger, and then we have a voice, because we've got to become the voice for the voiceless. So with that, I will stop here. Thank you all very much. And now I'm open to taking questions, queries, etc. Thank you, Suparna.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for that lovely talk. It was so comprehensive, and I'm sure the students would have been able to relate to it because they have done Seva as part of their curriculum, and they have, heard of Bachpan Bachao Andolan, and I did mention Salam Bombay Trust also to them in class, and I was asking them to watch this movie because we have an entire paper on child rights and gender empowerment. You are familiar with the syllabus. I shared it with you the other day. So I'm sure they were able to, relate to various points of your talk, and you did it in such a simple manner that, and in the storytelling method that you started with, it was really amazing because, it reaches out to each and every individual. So thank you so much. And I would now request participants to put their queries in the chat box so that the speaker can address them. That includes faculty members also from other departments, other colleges. Swati, Sahani, any questions? Please put them in the chat box.
No questions, ma'am. I was just thanking the speaker, and it was really nice to hear you. I fortunately also have a similar experience. I worked as an intern at Salam Balak Trust after my MSc. We were sent to New Delhi railway station to talk to children. It was really traumatic, though the experiences were not good. And we as youngsters, it was really heartfelt and very disappointment when we talked to them. They were so young, they were lost, they were going somewhere with their parents and they were lost on the railway station. They were left here, they don't know where to go. All of them were holding those, they use tube lights and then take out something in their handker. They keep on keeping close to their nose. So very difficult it was for children.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, thank you for sharing, Swati. A couple of points on what you shared. So most of these children, the moment they're brought into spaces by the middle agents, the middlemen, they will be connected with some kind of substance abuse, because it's the addiction to that that keeps them open to being exploited in whatever way. So they'll be either,
Yes.
smelling thinners or sort of snuffing other stuff and all kinds of substances. So that's a very sad thing. That I also want to mention that, we work next to the garment industry, in an area called Kapasera, and
Mm-hmm.
I was at a meeting with a women's group the other day, and it's so strange because they shared that very often their children go missing from just outside schools. So there are actually organized groups that work on picking up children also, and some of them then find their ways into, groups of beggars, because the begging syndicate is yet another very, very profitable business, if I can call it that. So that's the other thing, that the child is very vulnerable in their community. This is also linked with many of us, because we have women who come to work in our homes who come from such communities, and because the mother is at work, the father is at work, or not really connected with the family, the children, when they come back from school, are just left to their own devices in the community, which is where then a lot of these issues start. So even, childcare programs and support groups within communities is a huge need in a country like ours, and hopefully these are things we will address, which is why I added the other name also, Watch Slumdog Millionaire, because it talks about the whole begging mafia and how that operates. And I forget the name of the other movie, the kid who runs away from India, and it's a true story, and lands up in Australia, and then his comes back to find his parents, and I forget
I
its
think
name.
Lion. Lion is the name.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah,
Thank you, Swati. Yes,
line,
Lions. So
line.
these are all sort of movies which give us a lot of insight into. And then there are a lot of videos, end human trafficking. If you just Google end human trafficking, you'll find a lot of resources and information on what people have done, what businesses can do. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Meeta,
so
would you
much.
like to say something? Meeta, I
Yeah,
saw
I was
you.
just about. Yeah, so thank you so much, ma'am. It was, I would like to bring about 2 points over here. Firstly, as pedagogues in child development, sometimes we tend to miss the corporate and the economic dimension to child development. And talks
Mm.
like this are very important in situating us back into the context, because this is something which is the need of the hour. We can't be like pigeons closing our eyes in the threat of the cat catching us. So it's like we have to open up and we have to understand that how is the context placing us today. Also, secondly, you mentioned about this armament industry and human trafficking. I was reading an article in the Guardian the other day, which mentioned about the cosmetic industry and how the mica, this element mica, which is
Yes.
basically used in highlighters and foundation, how the cosmetic is. So it was actually it was a story by the Brute, and they were mentioning the opposite sides, that when we go out and we are so mesmerized with beautiful women, endorsing good makeup and highlighters and their shining faces, and it was parallelly showing how children, as
Yeah.
young as 3-year-olds, because they have to dig in those mica mines and they have to extract it out, and how their bodies and their eyesight and their little tender hands are manhandled by this. So I was like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing for us as capitalist consumers that we do not realize the backdrop of what is happening. Like you said, how is the cheap product coming? We never realize. We are so happy with the output that we have got a cheap product, but we never understand that who is paying for it actually. And lately, it is going to be our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, who would be in debts for all these steaks that we are consuming at this moment. So thank you so much. Very
Thank
insightful. And
you. No, thank you, Meeta. Two great points that you've raised, and I will always say this: understand that usually social issues, whether it is to do anything from rape to violence to things like child labor, all the issues that we discuss, debate, even on media and social media, most of them are very happy discussing the symptoms. Very few conversations ask, why is this happening? What is the root cause? So the root cause analysis must be there whenever any issues are taken up. This is really, really important. And you mentioned the cosmetic industry, very true. Cosmetics, and I also want to mention the blood diamonds, the jewelry. We're all crazy about jewelry and diamonds. What happens in those mines, similar to what happens in cosmetics. And please also understand, if you begin to understand the economic structures, you will be shocked to find that it's the same handful of businesses which own most of the businesses from an investment standpoint, whether it is media, whether it is different industries, whether it is pharma, whether it is, whatever it is across. And therefore, they're able to influence consumer behavior, by the fairer skin, the shinier highlighter, they, and understand this, and I'm saying this as a psychologist, the moment you expose yourself to messaging which makes you feel that you're not okay exactly the way you are. Um, you have to be slimmer, your hair has to be straighter, your skin has to be fairer, you have to dress in a certain way, your lip shade has to be. The moment you open yourself up, know this, you're also being manipulated and exploited. Okay. So it's really important for us to wake up and see that we are the ones who are making informed choices. So, as consumers, if we are able to make informed choices, then we are able to influence the businesses to behave differently. So, thank you for raising those points.
Thank you, Meeta. Anyone else? Suparna?
Hi, Nimi. Hello, all.
Reema.
I must appreciate Nimi for keeping us engaged with amazing sessions. Thanks, Lakshmi ji, for an
Thank
amazing talk. It's been nostalgic because even I have worked for Salam Balak Trust, and
you.
you took me back to my memories with Sanjay and on the police station with the kids running around. But what's sad is we're talking, but things are not changing on the ground reality. But I'm sure such important messages put across to our students in different forums and repeatedly would definitely bring about some positive change. Thank you so much. Very, very simplistically put, and the experience was doing the talking. So
Thank
I'm
you.
sure our girls really benefited.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Reema. So I had let Sanjay know that I'm doing this talk today, and I'll be talking about
Oh,
Salam Balak
great,
Trust.
great.
Oh, that's
And,
lovely.
yeah, and Sanjay, for those of you don't know, Sanjay Roy, he's on the board of Salam Balak Trust, but he's also the founder of the Jaipur Literary Festival, the
Yes.
Mahindra Kabira Festival, the Goan
Yeah.
Jazz Festival. So they do a lot, but they a lot of good comes out of. So here's an example of an enterprise which does so much of good. So businesses can be used in whatever way. It can be huge power for change. So thank you, Reema, for sharing that.
I think Lakshmi, at some point of time, because most of us are from child development background. In those days, it was called child development. Now it's called human development. Have some experience of working with children, involved in child labor and things like that. Way back in the 80s, I got the opportunity to work with the Delhi Council for Child Welfare, and they had a project on. They used to call it child labor in those days.
Yes.
And there were these children who would come in the evening, for their literacy classes and for some vocational training and, games and sports and things like that. And I remember we even visited one Rain Basera there to see the night
Right.
shelters and
Right.
things like that.
Right.
So, I'm just getting a little nostalgic, after listening to your talk today. It's taking me back to the 80s, early 80s, when I got an opportunity to work with those boys. And of course, we have been taking our students to Bal Sahyog, and they have met the children there, and how they come through the contact clubs and they come to the organization and things like that. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we are not able to do much of community work, first-hand experience because of the situation being what it is right now. So what better than calling experts like you who have, hardcore field experience to come and speak to our students and share your experiences with them,
Thank you. Thank you. In fact, what you mentioned also brings me to two other points which I want to make. One is that if you see how we operate as a society now, and this is driven very consciously by advertising and media, is we are quick to judge. So, for example, Sonja's wife, Punita, she does a lot of work using theatre with
Hmm.
the juveniles in Tihar jail and others. In fact, I'll connect you with Punita. She'll be a good
Sure.
resource person again for you to speak,
Hmm.
to sort of have on your talks. And so when I hear discussions in the media, we are so quick to judge. This
Hmm.
child is a problem, he's a psychopath, he's a this, he's a that,
Hmm.
without trying to understand why would a child who's born innocent become that?
True.
Why did a Hitler become a Hitler? There's a story there. So we have to, why does a rapist become a rapist? We have to ask the why, and those fingers will point back at all of us. So, this need to stop labeling people with problems, but really looking at how we can help them. And anyone on Facebook would be very, very familiar with this post, which has been doing the rounds since years, and I love it. About this African term called Ubuntu,
Hmm.
Ubuntu. Ubuntu basically means that their whole philosophy is that if there is somebody who has a problem in the society, then it's the responsibility of the rest to come together and hold him and heal him and
Yeah.
love him and hug him more so that he heals. Instead of saying you're judged, you're this, you're that, you're labeled, and then you're put behind bars. So, see how we treat each other as human beings is also going to decide what the outcome will be for us. And the chaos that we see outside, going back to this great psychologist, philosopher, mystic called Carl Jung, he said that, what
Hmm.
we see outside is nothing but a manifestation of our own collective consciousness. So if
True.
we've got to change things outside, we've got to start by changing things within us. How
Within.
do we come across? What is the healing touch? What is the word of hope, love, joy that we send out to others, especially people who are hurt or in pain or who need that extra bit of love? So um, I think we can all sort of do so much. It never really ends. Last point is, wherever you can, open up the avenues for expression. And I have to say, Nirmala ma'am, it was very inspiring when I met you last time and you talked to me about how your students have been doing all this work on, using storytelling and art and
Hmm.
puppetry to
Hmm.
reach out to,
Yeah.
students in rural communities. See, that is what is needed, because the power of storytelling to create change is huge. And why is it? It's a science, because when you tell a story, certain parts of your brain are engaged which will never be engaged if you're just doing a didactic lecture. So
Yes.
other faculties within your brain, other neurons get activated, which are then connected with your emotional system, and therefore your response becomes a far more powerful, profound, and holistic one. So I'm also going to bring another resource for you. It's a boy called Suraj. He
Hmm.
works in the community in Kapasera, doing fantastic work. Uses theater, uses community organizing. So it'll be great for your students to listen to
That'd be
Suraj's journey
wonderful.
also.
Hmm.
So I think this way, if we continue to connect, so what can we do during times of pandemic when we can't really be out in the community? But what we can do is connect more and more with each other, form those networks, open your hearts, and then when things open up in the world, we'll be ready to step out as a force of nature.
It's, thank you so much for all the contacts that you're going to share with us. I'm sure we'll really have a wide experience, and that's what we need. We want our students to get all the exposure that they can. And yes, Lakshmi, that was a very fruitful experience. We had this paper on early childhood care and education, and the students had created, teaching learning material, and then they were, where do we go now? The play schools are closed, and how do we do it? And then we started calling up play schools and telling them that we would like to do something online for the children, please do
Oh,
something.
lovely.
And NGOs, they said, okay, we'll put up a huge screen in the center, and we make the students sit with social distancing and things like that. And there were some of my students who were in Uttarakhand, and they were somewhere in Bharatpur, various parts of India. They contacted the play schools there, and we managed to do such a huge outreach And that
Wow.
was something which was totally unplanned, but I felt, that once the teaching learning material is there, we need to do storytelling and other activities. But how do we go about it? We had no clue. But then when we reached out to people, they were so receptive to the idea, and they said, yes, we would love it. And then they got into the Teach for India program through
Right.
this. So, one thing leads to another.
Absolutely.
And
You know,
I just feel
yes.
her.
No,
Yeah.
no, go on, ma'am. Go
No,
on.
no, no. I just feel that, probably the old saying, where there is a will, there is a way, works.
Actually, these old sayings all need to be brought out, of the dusty cupboards, because, anything that stays for so long comes from a lot of wisdom. And so you're
True.
absolutely right about that. And I think this is the opportunity, we have to actually reach out and, when we come back to things like the power of stories. So I've been, working with, I do a little bit of soul coaching, working with women and girls one on one. Just it's my psychologist role. So when I'm working with people, I realize, through the pandemic, just how much their sense of isolation, their emotional and mental health, all of this is impacted. Um, Women, particularly, are having to juggle working from home, managing families, the children's education, classes. It's a lot of stress. And so what happens is when you bring in storytelling and theater and cinema and other things, your heart begins to expand, and that's where the inspiration comes. So whenever there's a crisis, what people seek the most is inspiration. So
True.
this is a time to really send out and open up those inspiring spaces. And you have a whole group of wonderful students with you who can, in their own, using their own creativity, whether it's song, music, dance, theater, whatever it is, they can just actually be this instruments for inspiration, so that more and more people feel that there is hope. That's what we need to do. We need to bring back hope in these times of hopelessness and despair.
True. True. So well said. Anyone else from the audience? Any queries? Anyone else? Suparna, anybody would like to say something?
Um, Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for such a wonderful talk. I can see your whole persona, your expressions are walking the talk. I mean, we can see how you have, taken action. So I also actually truly believe in compassion and action. So and I'm so motivated, and I am so grateful that uh, all of my students and other students who have joined, hmm, so they have learned so much today,
Thank
and
you.
our experiences, their own experiences, will make them better human beings, as you said in the beginning. So it is how we as people, as fellow human beings, respond. And this one talk will have a ripple effect on so many lives. Really,
Thank
really
you.
grateful to Nimi and Lakshmi. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Suparna.
I think I am being thanked for no reason. I haven't done anything actually.
Ma'am, you're the conduit to bring it all together. You see, platforms and open spaces are really needed. Safe spaces where we can express, we can think, we
That
can
is true.
discuss. Opening up those spaces, and particularly, I will keep repeating this. I truly believe in the next decade, it's going to be women who are going to step out of their homes, because it's the women, when they become inspired enough, they will take action on behalf of the whole society, because they care about the future of their children, the future of the planet. And you will see more and more women. A lot of your students will be the one who will be leading from the front in the coming times. So it's great that you have this access and you continue to open these spaces. And it was your openness which really, really moved and touched me when I met you. So thank you for that. To find an open individual in these times is not very easy, I can
I
say.
second that. I second that totally.
Warmly reciprocated, Lakshmi. I too felt the same way. That's why I just told you immediately that I'm going to call you for a talk, and it would be on child labor. Instantly I felt that. You were the person for it. And I'm so glad that next week we are having a talk on the problems of street children, and Sudha is going to do it for
Oh,
us.
wonderful.
Sudha Parthasarathi, who has a lot of experience with Dipalia, and so she has agreed to do it for us, and I'm looking forward to that session too. That's why I said it's a series on child rights, and we
Excellent.
need to discuss these things in an open forum. Students, any one of you would like to share your case profile or anything with Lakshmi ma'am? Vidhi, Anchal, any one of you? Students? Anchal, are you there?
I think there is some problem with her mic.
Vidhi, are you there? Would you like to tell ma'am about your experience? Is she there?
Hello, ma'am. I don't know if ma'am. If I'm
Louder,
audible.
Vidhi. Vidhi, louder, beta.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Thoda aur.
Actually, there's been some issue with my mic and speaker today. So,
No, we can hear you. Go on. Go
Now
on.
it's okay.
yeah. So, first of all, it was an amazing session, ma'am. Loved it. Currently we are starting child rights in the semester. So, getting to listen to such amazing and wonderful speakers like you who have such experiences, and you're also knowledgeable. So thank you so much. It really helped us in understanding our paper better and understanding this topic in general better. So thank you so much. I hope we would see you more for future in the future sessions. So thank you so
Happy
much.
to. Happy to. Thank
Hello,
you.
ma'am.
Yeah, Anchal.
Hello, Anchal.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a really great talk, ma'am. So, ma'am, we third year students are doing a case profile on children in different circumstances, and just want to share a little experience. Right now, we are doing on it. Currently, we are working on it, and the experience is really amazing because we get to know the difficulties the children are facing during this age, and it is a great experience. Also, I would like to share something with you. I'm working with a foundation called Vikshit Foundation. So they are working on children who are working on streets and doing begging. So our motto is to to help children, to provide them basic facilities, or to provide them proper education, and to get rid of begging and all. So I am working on that as well. So I just thought I
Mm.
should share with you this thing as well. Thank you, ma'am.
That's great. That's great. And, it's a very, very important issue. And really getting them out of begging, but then into education and other livelihoods, because it's usually poverty which pushes them into these things. So I'm sure the organization you're working with is looking at everything. So continue doing your work, and always, understand that expertise comes through experience. So this is a message for everyone. If you want to be an expert, get your experience, however you can, wherever you can. And also, my humble submission is, I don't think one's learning should ever end. So I'm very much still a learner. I learn from each of you when I hear these things, and that keeps me going. So let's all be learners as we go along this journey.
Yes, learning never ends. And Lakshmi, I'm so happy to share with you that some of my students have set up their own girl up clubs. That is
Oh,
girls empowering girls. The concept came from US.
right.
And initially they were working with another girl up, and then they felt that they could do their own stuff, and they had certain gender issues that they wanted to address, and now they are doing workshops for
Ah,
the community. And recently they did a workshop for Sequin on menstrual hygiene for the young
excellent.
girls from Mewad, Rajasthan. And
Excellent.
I got very appreciative reviews from the coordinators of Sequin, saying that these young girls have done a fantastic job, and their sessions were really appreciated. So I'm glad that the students are becoming the change makers. They're taking it on themselves to spread
Yes.
awareness and sensitization, you know.
Yes. This
So
will be the generation that actually heals this world. We just have to kind of continue to support and encourage them, but they are the ones. In a
yes.
decade, we'll see they are the ones who are going to bring about the changes.
Yes,
So,
and they registered with Girl Up India and Girl Up UN, and they did
oh,
everything. And then they came and told me, "Ma'am, we've done it now. Can we do a session for our students?" So I said, "That's wonderful." And now, of course, they're doing it for government schools. They're doing it for other NGOs who have requested them. They
this
did
is
one for
actually very good because we could actually bring them into our community in Kapas Hera also, because we
please.
are working with women home workers. And
Yeah.
so for the women to understand their own sort of, hygiene, health, all of this is really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought, Anchal, you didn't mention that to Lakshmi ma'am, but Anchal
Yes,
is one of the office bearers of
Ah,
the Girl Up,
wonderful.
and she's
thank you so
been
much, ma'am, for mentioning this.
Wonderful.
so
We'll be
you've
in
done it.
touch for sure around some of these issues. We've got to strengthen and spread these networks wherever
Yes.
we can. Yeah.
Yeah. So any other queries, questions, comments? Anybody?
So far, I can't see any queries, but all the compliments for your talk. And I would like to say that you explained everything in such a beautiful way through stories and through sharing your experiences. And the way you were saying that people get inspired. I'm very sure that all of us, and specifically me, I got really inspired the way you were speaking, the way you were sharing your experience. And there's a particular word, the jasba, I would say, with which your talk was going on was, it kept me in the talk and I could not even move to do anything else, but I was hang on in the talk. So I really loved your talks. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much for
you.
this session.
Thank you, Prerna, and I love Urdu, so thank you for using Jasba. Such a beautiful language, yeah. But
Yeah.
no, it's been an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be here with all of you. And like I said, we can feel the energy of all the women in this space, and it's an incredible. The Shakti is very, very strong. So more power to all of us is what I would say. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now I'll request everybody to unmute their cameras for a group photograph with Lakshmi. We want to document this. We want to capture this moment. So everyone, please, everyone, students, faculty, everybody.
So it's good to be able to see some of the faces.
Yes, otherwise, you just feel as if you're talking to a blank
No, I
wall.
just see a lot of alphabets. So I
Yes, yes.
back in
Nita,
nursery.
unmute. Vithi, Rima, please. Everyone, please. We want to capture this.
Isn't this beautiful? I mean, just look at us. We don't need fairness creams and highlighters, and these are such beautiful faces. Everyone's so unique, just the
Yes.
way you've been made, and we have to celebrate our womanhood. We have to celebrate who we are. When we
Anchal,
begin
are
to
you taking the
celebrate, we
picture?
are powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And make sure everybody's covered. I want everybody in the frame. So nice to see everyone here today.
Same here. Thanks once again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks. Um, are we done, Anchal?
Yes,
Taken all the pictures? Okay. So, my formal vote of thanks. Lakshmi, thank you so much for doing this session for us. And, I have no words to express. All that I can say is heartfelt gratitude from the Department of HDFE. And I knew this was going to be a different kind of a session, and we wanted it to be like that. And I told my students that it's going to be very different, and you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to, take back a lot of insights from this session. And really, really loved your support, and throughout my engagement with you over the WhatsApp, and the lovely emojis you always send to me. And such a positive, bright person. You cheer up anybody and everybody. So, and I hope the smile on your face remains forever.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege, and Yeah, I'm a big believer that if we want to see more love, we've got to start by spreading the love. So yeah, anyone who's connected with me on Facebook or WhatsApp will see a lot of red hearts everywhere. Spread the love, I say, spread the love. So thank you again, ma'am. Always here,
And I hope
anytime.
you'll be in touch with us.
Ji,
And
bilkul.
if there's any opportunity for our students to intern somewhere or
Absolutely.
any kind of volunteering that you come
Sure,
across, do
sure.
let us know.
I will for
We
sure.
will be
And
happy to.
definitely community level engagement. I'll connect you with a couple of organizations which can then probably, work
Thank
with
you so
us
much.
in this as well.
Thank you so much, because our students are very passionate about community
Yes,
work. And I
yes,
hope the situation improves and we are able to do some field work,
yes, absolutely.
hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Lakshmi. Thank you from the core
Thank
of my heart. Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, participants from JDM and other colleges, students, and faculty who took their time out to be here with us today. And HDFE always comes together, I know that. And we'll meet again on the 24th, same time. For a talk on street children. Lakshmi, I'll send you the link as well.
For
Please
sure.
join us if you are free at that
Absolutely. I
time.
will. I will.
Thank you so
I
much, everyone. Take care and stay safe. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone. Thank you. Students, you can now leave, and you have a meeting with the principal at 12 noon. Only the third years. Only the third years. You have a meeting with the principal at 12 noon. Please join that meeting. Thank you. Thank you, girls. Bye bye.